and welcome to Why Are You Laughing at Me with Gherkin Pickle Water. Today's special guest is Michelle Matlock, comedian, clown, Cirque du Soleil star, leader of the Mammy Project. And Michelle, can you tell people who you are and what you do?
Sure. You just did a pretty good job, Michelle. Yeah, I'm a performing artist, clown, teacher, creative coach. Um, I've been doing a lot of teaching lately and doing a little bit of performing. And just like I've been in the entertainment, business, I guess, for most of my life. And it's had different phases and whatnot, but I've had a pretty awesome journey, and it's still going.
That's wonderful. Um, yeah. So, how many years have you been in comedy?
Uh, Probably since the day I was born. um, I've been laughing or making people laugh. I grew up in a family that loved to laugh. But if you're talking about like being in, like I didn't necessarily, you know, go into it to be doing comedy. It just sort of that's sort of just what happened. And of course it's something that I love to do, make people laugh, and anything that I'm writing or trying to create, of course I am trying to look at the funny side of things. And then of course, being in the clown world, that's what we're relying on, is the laughter. That's how we know we're at least close to clowning. So I mean, I don't know, it's been a long time, been a long time.
Well, let's look at that. Uh, where currently where you are right now, where when you're being funny professionally, where does your humor come from? Where does your comedy come from? What's at its root?
What's at its root? Well, I guess at the root, if I'm, to be in a therapy session, I was trying to make my parents laugh, trying to make my brothers laugh, my grandma. Like we that's, I think, many of us, that's where it starts, is with our family, our culture, what we learn. I mean, in my particular family, like if I could make my parents laugh, I could get out of trouble. you know at school, I guess, if I could make folks laugh, I could not get beat up every day. um that's where the root of it is, I think. And we all know what it is to make our siblings laugh, or make our parents laugh, or make our best friends laugh when we were kids. You know, we all know what that is, and I think that's the core of it. I always say to my students that, that's the kind of thing that we're trying to find and be comfortable with in front of an audience when we're trying to find our clown, is like, pulling from our own experiences, our own culture.
So, what kind of things do you find funny?
um, um, I tend to laugh also when other people aren't laughing. So I find a lot of things funny, but usually what makes me laugh are when things are completely absurd. Um, but then I also laugh at just the classic things, like slapsticky things and people tripping. And but my favorite kind of comedy is that comedy that's like that deadpan comedy, or the comedy of, like, I don't know, the movie Airplane that I saw when I was growing up. That kind of comedy where they're just saying stuff straight faced and it's absolutely absurd, um and silly or outside of the box. One of the famous actresses in there talking jive, like she can talk jive talk, to the black folks on the
Yeah.
plane. I mean, it's like, just ridiculous stuff that's sometimes maybe culturally inappropriate, but we're laughing at ourselves and having a good time and not being necessarily offensive. So yeah, it's the absurd stuff, physical comedy, Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder,
Yeah.
their physical comedy that they had together. These are the things that I grew up sort of watching, right? Um, the Electric Company and Sesame Street,
Oh yeah.
comedy, the kids comedy, that, and um, uh, of course, like Lucille Ball, and um, just getting into ridiculous situations that need that clown logic problem solving to get out of. Those are the things, all that is funny to me. And I love laughing, so I usually find other things funny too.
So when you're, hmm, how about this? Your icons. Who you mentioned Lucille Ball, you mentioned Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. Who are your comedy icons? Who do you strive? Whose mark do you strive to try and hit, whether you can hit it or not? Where are your comedy gods?
Sure. Well, those ones that I just mentioned, I mentioned them because those are, uh, Gilda Radner, Whoopi Goldberg. As I've gotten older and done more research in old time stuff, I look at Burt Williams, who was a minstrel, African American minstrel, I should say Caribbean American minstrel performer who was black, who had to get in blackface, and that was very offensive. But when you really look at what he was doing and some of his physicality, he was absolutely brilliant. Um, uh, um, yeah, those are the people that I can think of offhand, that I was like, wow, growing up watching them. And then I was a big lover of cartoons too, like Daffy and Bugs Bunny and stuff like that were animated, doing the impossible physical comedy, but like just the timing and the silliness and the ridiculousness of their banter. So the creators behind that stuff, I guess, I would also lift up as far as comedy is concerned. But yeah, those three were, like Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor, and Lucille Ball, Whoopi Goldberg. Those are some people that I grew up watching. Gilda Radner. Lily Tomlin
Yeah,
was huge. Lily Tomlin, watching her do her solo shows and her physicality and her comedy, like that was a huge influence on me. Of course, the Carol Burnett show was a huge influence on me. Carol Burnett is like a hero to me. And seeing the women in comedy was awesome too, because it was a male dominated thing. Laughing, you
yeah.
know, all the characters on there, that stuff made me laugh, and I loved it. I loved it. Carol Burnett show is really one that like made me want to do like little skits and stuff. Flip Wilson, American guy here, like he was also did a lot of characters in physical comedy, very funny. Um, yeah, those are the people that I grew up watching that made me laugh, that I wanted to imitate or be like, or make people laugh like that. But yeah, like I said, I grew up in a funny family, so just my family too. Like, we laughed all the time. My parents were pretty funny and silly, um, and so we were making each other laugh a lot.
A lot of the people you mentioned are both cerebral and physical. They're mixing both verbal comedy and physical comedy heavily. Um, let's see, Dominique Jandot. I like his way of phrasing it. I mean, it's a truism that I think most people see, is that there's no comedy without some pain in it. How do you feel about that? Do you see it the same way? Do you see pain at the core of comedy to some degree?
Um, yeah, no, I know. I learned that, or I was exposed to that for David Shiner, does a lot about pain. Well, I mean, I definitely think that that's there. Um, I don't deny that. Like, there's funny. We like to see we laugh at other people's pain. Like, that's, that ties into, we laugh when people get it wrong and acknowledge it. When something goes wrong and we acknowledge it. Like, I understand that. I don't necessarily lean into that when I'm working. But I do get that. I understand it. I think that it is true. I don't think it's the only thing. But yes, I do think that that is a truth.
I think there's a lot of that in not just in slapstick, where I mean, obviously a great deal of slapstick is Schadenfreude, um, but also in it's self-deprecating comedy. It's in there as well. Um, so speaking of slapstick, how much of your comedy falls to the physical? How much of what you do is physical versus verbal or cerebral?
Well, I mix it, right? I come from a theater background. So I'm used to having monologues and dialogue. And so when I got pulled into the clowning world, this was a whole different thing for me and a whole different study. And so what I began to do was combine the two. So I do a combo of both. I also went to a physical theater acting school, like classical training acting school, which was that we create characters from a physical point of view.
Okay.
So while it doesn't necessarily have to be comedy, it could be a dramatic character. We're starting from a physicality. So physicality is very important in the work that I do, right? Um, and so is having dialogue, when necessary. But I love thinking about it from a physical point of view. I love, I'm older now, so not as much as I used to be super physical, but that's what I still teach, and that's what I still love to see, the physicality of everything, and the slapstick, the funny ways of inhabiting different characters, whether it's exaggerated body parts or whatever, like that. I think that's the way to be most communicative in the art, in the art of performance. I definitely did, like, I love stand-up comedy, love it, love it, love it, absolutely. But it's not my medium of choice, right? Like, but I do love it. But yeah, I tend to go super physical, super exaggerated. um yeah, that's what I find to be funny.
I find you mentioned stand up. I love stand up too. I'm trying to do I'm we're working on a show for next year in which we're doing a clown show, but we're also doing a small segment of stand up each of us, which is just terrifying. And I've written like two jokes in my sleep that I woke up and polished. Um but I look at stand up as kind of more oriented towards defense and aggression. It's there's a lot of punching, it seems, either I
Hmm.
self-deprecating or at other groups, or uh as opposed to clown, which is, I think, more introspective and reactive. But that makes it sound like clown is somehow inherently better, morally or ethically, and I don't think that's the case. I think I'm just really biased. um
Right. Well, I mean, they're both, I believe they're both interactive, like, because the thing that separates clown from, like, regular theater, I think, is the fourth wall, right? Like, the actual interaction and relationship with the audience. And I think that with stand up, you have to have that too. But that's interesting because, I tried to write a show for a clown festival that was written like a stand up comedy routine,
okay.
but was combining the physical comedy. I don't know that I necessarily achieved it, but I just to talk about something that you were saying. Like, for me, the best comedians are the storytellers, right? Like, not necessarily the ones that are telling the joke that's like but bump, which I think that that can be fine, and there's that style. But for me, like, I think of like a Ellen DeGeneres who starts off telling some story about her life and goes down this absurd road and then brings it all back around. And there's jokes in there, but there's a rhythm also that she has that's like this funny, and it's a storytelling thing. So that's what I was trying to achieve when I set out to write that show. Um, yeah, I don't, I like, and I, that I don't know where I'm going with this, but it just sort of blend. I like blending the different things and having that feel intertwined in it. Like, I love having that dramatic feel of theater intertwined within the next thing you see is like a full out, physical comedy clown routine. And then next is just a monologue, that's kind of how how the Mammy Project is. Uh, and I think that almost every comedian like that I love anyway, at some point in their career or project has used the skills that it takes to clown. Right? Like that's the thing about it is that we use we use these skills when it's necessary. It's not the piece may not be a full out clown thing. So I've rambled on. I don't know.
Well, what would you call those skills? What would those skills be?
Um, you know, uh, super physical, exaggerated, over the top. Like uh, um, what's his face? Shoot,
Jim
um,
Carrey? Jim Carrey?
yeah, Jim Carrey. That's right. Jim
Yeah.
Carrey, like like he's pulling from the clown world in his almost all of his movies. It's
Mm-hmm.
over the top, ridiculous. Sometimes even addressing the audience, which is through the camera, like directly, but like and having that relationship. So, but I could go back to Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. Like you gotta, that stuff when they're walking down in jail in the jailhouse and we're bad and all that. That is clown to me. Um, it's not a clown movie, but that is a clown moment.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and Lucille Ball, like you can take any episode of I Love Lucy, any of the famous ones it is clown, like a lot. Sometimes the logic that she's using to solve her problems, the physicality, the pratfalls, yeah, to me it's clown. It's using clowning.
So you mentioned the stand-up show, clown show that you wrote. Did you launch that show? Did you stage it?
Yeah, I took it to a clown festival that happened. That must have been 2014 or something like that in New York. I was on tour with Cirque, and I had a little break, and they asked me to come bring a show. So I had the show in mind. I was writing the show, so I took it and I did it. I did it there. I think I did it 4 or 5 times just there. It was for that, and I didn't really do it since then. It got a good response, and I remember it being really fun. But I don't know. Like that experiment was interesting, just because I don't. If someone saw that, I don't know that they would say, "Oh yeah, that's clown." Um, there was a lot of laughs, but I don't know. I
Uh,
don't know. I didn't get back on it really, but
that's the key is getting those laughs. Well, it's an experiment, you said, and a lot of times with an experiment, you're running the risk of it just falling, just landing flat on your face, and not necessarily in a funny way. Um, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with failure? How do you deal with the flat response? What do you do?
yeah. Well, what I do now, what I've had to learn over many years, is I acknowledge it. Have to acknowledge it. You got by either acknowledging it physically, like okay, that, or verbally, like oh that okay, I thought that was going to be funnier, or that was not funny. I intended for that to be funny,
That's a, I like
or some sort of physical thing, or exhaling, or just leaving.
that. That's good. No, I like that a lot. I love it when people
Yeah,
come into that bit. Like I hate it when people are on a talk show or something and they pretend to get up and storm off. I love it when they actually don't come back. And that's
yeah,
that's beautiful. That committing to that bit is just one of the most beautiful things you can do because you're taking a much bigger risk in doing that. Um, okay, well, we talked about a little bit of laughter and pain and slapstick. Aesthetics in comedy. How do you use aesthetics to bring the funny?
Hmm. Let's see. Well, it really depends on what the container is. Um, because I've worked in enough, in many different situations where it's a everything from full on ringling style clown makeup and costumes
Okay.
to the simple character costume of like being in a hospital setting clowning, or being in a show where I'm just like wearing my street clothes that then, you know, physicality, funny pieces come out. I mean, it just depends, like I tend to be more simplistic, and I want things to just come be able to come out naturally. I don't feel like, I mean, I think that like clown noses serve their purpose, but you don't have to have a clown nose to clown, in my opinion. It just depends on what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for. But I tend to be more simplistic. I tend to want to always have a hat, some sort of silly hat that I can play with or do tricks with. But um, or and I tend to wear either too tight of clothes or too big of clothes. um, I tend to want to look silly in that way. I tend to want to dress outside of what the typical gender stereotype it might be. I wear a lot of bow ties and top and neckties that are too long or too short. Um, but I tend to want it to come through the physicality or whatever the situation, the action that's happening. Rely on that rather than just maybe a costume gag, but those can be funny too.
Um, can you tell me some about the Mammy Project?
Yeah, sure. So the Mammy Project is a show that I wrote 20 years ago, pretty much.
Oh, wow.
Uh, that explores the stereotype, icon, and myth of Mammy in America. It's centered around the character of Nancy Green, who was actually a real person in history. She was the first woman to be hired to play the part of Aunt Jemima from the Pancake Mix. Um, and she debuted the Pancake Mix and this character at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. And at that same fair, Black activists like Frederick Douglass and Hallie Q. Brown, Ida B. Wells, they were fighting to be included into that, for African Americans to be included in that fair because they were excluded. So I show these two things happening in history. Um, Nancy Green debuting as Aunt Jemima and being so popular, that sort of old time slavery, born out of slavery and minstrelsy fantasies that white folks love, up against Frederick Douglass fighting for African Americans' progress to be viewed at the fair and included into the fair, which was not. And I think that it is very insightful, um, as to why, why we are the way we are today, that these two things exist at the same time. So I show that, have a lot of fun with it, do some movie impersonations of Mammy, and tell Nancy Green's story, and try to have some fun. It's a deep subject, but I also try to have fun with it and make people laugh, so that we can also think and grow.
That's beautiful. Is it still showing? Can people see it anywhere?
Yeah, so like I said, I wrote it 20 years ago, and then that's the that show. I was doing that show way back when Cirque came and saw the show and asked me to audition and create the role, and then I was plucked out of all of that and went on tour with Cirque for 10 years. So just last year, a woman that had seen it all those years ago applied for an NEA grant for it. I got an NEA grant to revive it. And so I did that last year in Kansas City Fringe Festival. So now it's getting booked for 2025. So I
Okay.
hope to be in Seattle in 2025. I believe that I will be at the Montreal Clown Festival with it in 2025, and perhaps somewhere, some other places on the West Coast. So it's just sort of booking out right now. So yeah, in 2025, I follow me, or whatever, to find out the info where it's going to be if you want to see it.
Anything else coming up for you?
Let's see, just local stuff in my hometown of Tacoma. I'm writing and directing shows for the Puget Sound Rebels, which is a crazy, awesome organization. And what else? What else? Um, that's it. I'll just push the Mammy Project that'll happen in April in Seattle at Intiman Theater. You can check it out, look it up. I think that's the only thing that I'm pushing. And I teach at Del Arte, so check out if you want to learn clown and and be in a beautiful Northern California town for a couple of weeks. Check out Del Arte Internationals. They got great stuff going on, including clown.
Two more questions. First off, where can people find you online?
MichelleNicoleMatlock.com, at Michelle N Matlock, at Michelle N as in Nicole Matlock on all the socials. Yeah.
Great. And lastly, doesn't have to be your absolute all-time favorite because it's often hard to pick a favorite, but tell me a favorite joke of yours that you like. It doesn't have to be one you wrote, just a favorite joke that you love.
I'm oddly enough horrible at jokes. I never remember them, but there is one that killed when I used to do outdoor theater with Circus Amok
Okay.
that that came up, and it goes like this. What are the best kind of bees?
The best kind of bees?
Yeah.
I can think of a couple, but please tell me, what are the best kind of bees?
Boobies.
Yes. Very nice. All right, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today on Why Are You Laughing at Me? It was really great getting to talk to you. And this will go up in early September, so I'll ping you when it's up, okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.